This is IAQ Radio, Indoor Air Quality Radio, the voice of the indoor air quality industry, with your hosts, Radio Joe Hughes and the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick. And now, Radio Joe Hughes.
Good day and welcome to IAQ Radio Plus. It's episode 754, and this week we welcome Barry Costa for a Life and Times interview with an industry icon and educator extraordinaire. Barry recently retired. We look forward to learning his thoughts on our industry and his tips for being the most popular instructor we know. Before we get started, let's thank our sponsors. They're the reason we can continue doing the show. IAQ Radio Association sponsors are IICRC, the Institute for Inspection, Cleaning, and Restoration Certification at iicrc.org. The Restoration Industry Association, RIA, at restorationindustry.org. The Environmental Information Association, EIA, at eia-usa.org. IAQ Radio industry sponsors are Particles Plus at particlesplus.com. BioPlanet at byoplanet.com. Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com. EMSL Analytical Inc. at emsl.com.
And now you can win a cool prize. It's time for the IAQ Radio Trivia question. Be the first to correctly answer. Simply email your answer to czlotnick at cs.com. Or if listening live, just text your answer from your computer. And now, here's the Z-Man.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry to report no one correctly identified cardiologists Meyer Friedman and Ray Rosenman as the developers of the Type A, Type B personality theory, and who credited their insight to an upholsterer who was called to their attention the peculiar fact that the chairs in their waiting rooms were worn out only on the arms and on the front edge of the seat. This suggested to Friedman and Rosenman that their patients were getting up from the chairs frequently and were otherwise waiting anxiously. Here's today's IAQ Radio trivia question. Name the term used for a surname derived from a place name which included names of specific locations, such as the individual's place of origin, residence, or lands that they held, or more generically, names that were derived from regional topographic features. Today's guest is Barry Costa. Barry Costa's distinguished career in carpet installation, cleaning, and restoration spans over 50 years, including 39 years as an instructor. He's served on and chaired numerous national committees, contributed to national water damage standards, been a keynote speaker at conventions and special events, and also authored many articles in industry publications. Since becoming an industry-approved instructor in 1986, Barry's taught thousands of cleaning and restoration contractors worldwide, helping them earn certifications in carpet repair and reinstallation, water damage restoration, and other areas. After many years of in-person water restoration training, Barry is transitioned to exclusively live stream online training in 2020. Now a legend in the cleaning and restoration industry, Barry has had an immensely impact on both the industry and his students. Joe, over to you.
Welcome, Barry. Great to have you.
Thanks.
Barry, you and I didn't really get to interact too much over the years, but I always heard, when I was out teaching classes, the feedback would be, this guy, that Barry Costa, he's the greatest instructor ever, and you really affected your students in a really profound way. And I just wanted to say that to start out the conversation today. I never heard that about anybody else at that level, except maybe my cohort, Danny P. Hunt, who we did a lot of training together as well. So I just wanted to make sure we got that right at the beginning. How did you get started in the carpet business? Is that a family thing? Are you the first generation?
Joe, well, listen, in the late 1960s, my dad had a carpet shop. It was called Costa Carpet Company Incorporated. Yeah, that spills out and flows, doesn't it?
This in Massachusetts?
Yeah, in Taunton, Massachusetts. And I learned how to walk. My father put me back on my knees again. And at 12 years old, I was the youngest guy that could get him a cup of coffee. But I started installing carpet when I was 12. And in the early 70s, we bought a portable from Steamway, a System 400, and we got into carpet cleaning and water damage. It was whole family. My sister was in the accounting office. My two brothers and I, we were installing. But then I became a CFI certified master installer. I'm kind of proud of that. I'm only the second to score 100 on the master's exam, and I'm a FITC carpet installation instructor back August 1992 from the Georgia Institute of Technology. So I learned from my dad, who was a master, but I also formally went through other programs to really understand that industry well.
Very interesting. Cliff?
Yeah. Were you a member of any organizations, any IRC or any other regional trade associations, Barry?
Cliff, the NAIRC was my local one because I'm originally from New England, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. And I just found my R now that I moved to Arizona. I now drive a car, which is wonderful. But I was an NEIRC member, SCRT, and an ASCR, previous AIDS, now RIA member as well. And as far as when I was involved, I think NEIRC was my first, and branched out into the others. And if I can do somewhat of a plug for RIA, now, guys, when I was teaching my live stream schools, Joe, you had mentioned I transferred from doing face-to-face schools, and they were known for having lots of hands-on. My RRT was a 3-day school, 80% hands-on learning. I'm a real advocate of that. But when I became solely thanks to the COVID live stream, I told everyone, look, RIA used to have the reputation of being nothing but for the big guys, the big companies out there. SCRT was more kind of friendly to all companies, but that's no longer the case. In fact, if you're going to join one, RIA is one you absolutely want to join right now. I think the strongest thing of RIA going on is cross connection, and everything you guys are doing to support the restoration industry. And I'm a firm believer, if somebody's doing something to support you, in turn, you need to go back and support them, and not just financially, get involved.
Hey, Barry, I got a note here from the acronym police. NEIRC. What does that stand for?
New England Institute of Restoration and Cleaning.
All right. And what about SCRT?
Society of Cleaning Restoration Technicians. Boy, I feel like I'm taking a test. I'm nervous.
I'm just trying to help out the audience. Not everybody knows all those acronyms. There was another one, AC something. I can't remember what.
Yeah, ASCR.
ASCR. That was the
Association of Cliff. Help me out, buddy.
Specialists in cleaning and restoration.
I know that one.
Exactly.
That's the forerunner to RIA, correct? Which is the
That's
Restoration Industry Association. All right, we got through the acronym police.
Yeah, and as an association, guys, again, they can really advocate for the restoration industry, whereas IICRC, being a certification and standards writing body, isn't in the same position to be able to do what RIA does. So the synergy of the industry coming together is very powerful. Lincoln said a house divided will fall. And for a while, Cliff and Pete will remember this, our house was falling when there was a separation of some organizations, but lovingly, they've come back together. And I know Dan Bernazani and sadly, the late John Mosier worked very hard to try to make that happen a lot earlier in our careers, but it's there, and I'm really happy that that's happening.
Barry, I also want to go back just a little bit because earlier in your career, you were teaching. Tell us a little bit about your teaching career prior to getting into I guess you must have been doing it at the same time since you started at 12 in the carpet world. You must have also been going to school to be a teacher. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Joe. In fact, it was funny when you and I were talking, I learned that you were also a school teacher. So we had something in common in our past. But I graduated from Springfield College in Springfield, Mass. In 1976 with a degree in education, physical education. And I was a school teacher for 10 years in Peterborough, New Hampshire. And very proud, I was named Teacher of the Year by the NAFERD, the New Hampshire Association of Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance, and received the Excellence in Education Award by the state of New Hampshire. So that was my career. I always saw myself as Barry, the school teacher. And in 1986, when I left public school teaching, I don't know if you went through this, Joe, but I almost felt like I needed some help because I always envisioned myself as a teacher. And here I was going back into the carpet cleaning, restoration, installation industry again. I thought I left that. So bam, we just blended both lives and I got the best of all. Now I started teaching in the very industry I grew up in, learning when I was 12 years old and so on.
Now, what led you to leave the public schools?
Well, back in 1986, actually, when I started teaching in 76, contract offer was for 18,000.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
making that much a month doing cleaning and restoration. And as much as I love teaching, I didn't want to live on food stamps. But honestly, if I were to go back to teaching, Peterborough was such a great place. In fact, I had the luxury of working with a principal, Ken Greenbaum, who was years ahead of his time. And it was a real honor. I do miss the kids. But when I taught adults, I told them, I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to treat you like kids because we still are. Our bodies are getting older.
Barry, okay, so you got into the carpet world. You were in it, into school, back into it. Kind of probably did both at the same time. Most school teachers have to have a second job of some kind. Then at some point you became an IICRC instructor. What or who inspired you to become an IICRC instructor?
Well, that's interesting. Getting involved with IRCRC, Ralph Bloss, and gosh, he was a father to a lot of us. I'm looking at you, Joe, you, Cliff, and the gray hair seems to be a theme, but there's a lot of people that the younger people today will never have a chance to know or meet that really created the industry that we've all been blessed to be in. Murray Kramer, Wally Weber, Marty King. These are people that were icons that made this industry. And, each generation, the baton is handed off. So as far as getting involved with IRCRC, Ralph Bloss in Denver, along with Doyle, encouraged me. I think my first instructor was Ron Toney, who's still teaching. Yeah, Ron, Tom Hill, Joey Pickett. These were some of my early instructor colleagues. But as far as getting into the teaching end, Ralph Bloss took a chance on me in Denver, along with John Masuri of Ohio, Dick Hook of Michigan, Mac Hubbard in Connecticut. All of them have passed, but every one of them inspired me to kind of blend it together and then get involved with the IICRC as well. Well, and my personality is I like getting involved anyway. My problem is I have a hard time saying the word no. It normally comes out, okay, okay.
Understood. Too well. Cliff, let me turn it over to you, buddy.
Yep. So, you got involved, with IICRC. Was that as a volunteer first, or was that as an instructor, Barry, or kind of both?
Senility sets in, Cliff. I don't know which came first, the cart or the horse, but I do know that it probably was about the same time because I think the first committee I chaired was the Carpet Repair Committee when it was CRT, a one-day school on learning repair. And during my tenure, we created RRT, carpet repair and reinstallation, because a lot of people in water damage, once they disengaged the carpet, they were putting it back down again. We wanted to make sure at least they had some basic skill to do it correctly and save themselves from injury with whacking things in with a knee kicker and so on and so forth.
Joe?
Barry, you mentioned that your father did water damage restoration. So back in the early days of water damage restoration, I wonder what your thoughts are as far as how have things changed, and do you think it's all for the better?
Gosh, back in the 1970s, Cliff, you will recall all of this, okay? First of all, we birthed out of carpet installation. I think that was a big start for water damage was carpet installation. So we focused on the carpet. In fact, in-place drying, well, that wasn't really happening. We would yank the carpet up, bring it to a carpet cleaning shop that would clean area rugs, hang them, dry them, and reinstall them. And back then, I think our number one selling antimicrobial was red cherry deodorizer, because if you could make the smell go away, you were good, okay? And you were good for at least a week. And way back when, Heron Jute Pad was the number one selling cushion, smelled like a bunch of dead rats. So we've come a long way from the early days of, boy, that stinks. We never checked the walls. Who cared anyway? We could see the carpet was wet. These were our meters. We have come an awful long way from those days.
Interesting. And so you didn't even bother with drying out the flooring or the walls or any of that, or?
As I said, when we started way back when, our focus totally was on what we installed and all. And then we started paying attention to other things in the building. But gosh, that's a very humble beginning, isn't it, if you think about it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Cliff, let me turn it over to you.
Well, no, I think just to go a little bit further along with Barry, I mean, we used to call those the suck and hope days. You know, you'd suck the water out, spray odor control or an antimicrobial and hope that nothing bad was going to happen. But, you know, the one thing that you really didn't think about is what you couldn't see. And, you know, we could see that the carpet was wet and you couldn't see that the inside of the walls were wet and you didn't necessarily make that connection. You know, it was totally out of sight, you know, totally out of mind. And, you know, that's when Lloyd Weaver kind of came along with, you know, the air mover and, you know, moisture sensors and, you know, started using dehumidifiers along with that and so on and so forth. So I think it was a natural progression. But I think one of the a couple things working in our favor is that, you know, materials, or I'm sorry, wetness is not a natural state for many materials. So what's going to happen is they're going to dry eventually on their own through evaporation, and hopefully they're going to dry on their own before you have an odor problem or before you have a mold or bacterial problem. And you know, if what we did, what you know, wouldn't work or wasn't working, you know, you'd have a whole bunch of sick people and a whole bunch of sick houses and so on and so forth. But I think the fact that, you know, the carpet was removed, the water was extracted, the pad was replaced, you know, the floor would most likely dry naturally. And, you know, you got to think about the conditions in that property were better than the conditions on the carpet, you know, the other rooms and so on and so forth. You could open windows and you know, it's going to have a natural drying effect because the moisture is going to seek equilibrium. And we just didn't know those terms back then, but that's kind of what happened.
Well, you also
Everything
had,
reached,
go ahead, Barry.
no, well, everything reaches homeostasis at some point. And back then, if you think about it, homes breathed a lot more than they did after the energy crisis. With the energy crisis, we started buttoning up homes, in fact, so tight that we created an indoor air quality issue over time. The indoor air is more dangerous than the outdoor air because of all the trapped VOCs and you name it. And you know, Cliff, it's really interesting. Life is a cycle. I mean, things of the past tend to come back. Bell bottoms are back. Shag carpet is back. Polyester, holy crap, but is back. But you know, you made a statement. What we couldn't see. That is an issue in cleaning today. We just went through COVID, killed millions of people, and our industry needs to take a very, very, very hard look at cleaning and what we mean by cleaning and how we decide when something is or is not clean. Right now, we've been using visual acuity to decide, hey, that's clean. Well, I did a demonstration in Las Vegas. I had two boards, both contaminated, did ATP sampling on both, got my RLU readings pre and pre. I used water as a universal solvent. I used a spray bottle and a blue shop towel. With one board, I cleaned it with proper techniques. The other board, I did the wax on, wax off method that people will do with washing counters. And I asked the audience, do these look clean? They said, man, they're great. I said, you'd eat off of those, wouldn't you? Oh, yeah. Well, the board that I did proper training techniques, tactics, and tools in cleaning, I had a tremendous reduction of RLUs, relative light units. But the one I didn't use proper cleaning technique, the board was 8 times more contaminated now than it was originally. I just moved the particulates and deposited them in one spot. So I think the big challenge for our industry today is like back then, Cliff, it's what you didn't see that will kill you. It's what we don't see in cleaning. Forensic cleaning needs to be the new term. We have interim, we have restorative. We better start looking at forensic cleaning and cleaning to that level in today's society.
The one other thing I'd like to add, big difference between back in the day, the 60s and the 70s and today is the building materials you were working with, hardwood, plaster, not, was wood, not drywall, none of that stuff, so those are much more forgiving than today's, unfortunately. Barry, any comment on that?
Oh, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. So, as the host that receives the water, receives the soil, and so on has changed, our methodology needs to adapt along with that as well. And the greater knowledge this industry receives, organizations also have to adapt and be brave and make change and allow for that change to come in.
If this goes back to not being able to see it,
Yeah.
in 1987, we opened up, 86, I think it was, we opened up our unhoused training facility. And, we were doing, we would smoke it up, we would flood it and so on and so forth. And the area that we flooded was over a crawl space. So I never really had access to it. And I'll never forget, we were doing a water restoration class in our new facility when in 2000 and I think 2000, 2001 in any event. And in this facility, there was a basement underneath the room that we flooded. And what happened was we flooded the room, and I actually forgot a tool in the basement. And actually, Gary Fineri went down to pick up the tool for me. And at the time that he had done this, we were actually blowing some smoke or blowing some fog underneath the carpet. And he came up and he said, "You have to see this." And I said, "See what?" And I went downstairs and we saw it. And that was really the first time, I think, that moment changed my whole thought process. And I remember being very, very excited about it. And RIA was out, if I'm not mistaken, was in Palm Springs, California that year. And there was a water damage standards meeting. And I wasn't on the committee at that point, but I kind of went into the meeting. I was all excited. I had these slides and so on and so forth, and I wanted to show them. And your friend and mine, LJB, would not let me show them. And I think it really set the industry back, because I think had the people seen it, I think our whole thought process would have changed, and just
Yeah, Cliff, and thank you. I want to congratulate you. You had the first hands-on facility in water, in the unhouse in PA. Chuck DeWalt Jr., I love the man. He and Kurt Bolden Rest in peace, buddy. They were maniacs, and they kicked our butt and made us relook at water damage. But you had the first hands-on, and I had the first traveling hands-on water. Everybody said you can't do that. Well, I had a 9 by 12 platform, different wall textures, metal studs, wood studs, hardwood floor, stairs. I made the attempt to do a hands-on application on water damage, and that uh, uh, building went with me every place. So we made an attempt to do that. Cumbersome, but you started literally the evolution of see it, hear it, but do it. And in learning, you've got multiple modalities of how people learn, and so you created one of the first out there.
Barry, how did you drive that around in a truck or how?
Well, every distributor that hired me to do schools, um, first, because two huge crates, over 3,000 pounds of material was shipped ahead of me. And it took all day to get it all set up and prepped for the school. Because as a school teacher, Joe, you know that a lot of people think, oh, yeah, you just go in with a briefcase, open it up, get started. Not a good school teacher. There's so darn much prep you're doing, a pre, and it's crazy.
I think I'm starting to see why you were so popular. That's that the hands-on thing is just huge, and it's hard to do. It's hard to get that. If depending on where you're at, what was nice is when you were at distributors, you could pull a vac off the shelf, you could pull the dehumidifier, etc., and that was nice. And they had zippers and all that stuff, and that was very helpful. But oftentimes you weren't in that situation. You were in a hotel somewhere, and they didn't get. I remember a couple of hotels weren't real happy with us when you start putting tape on their walls and so on. They were, "Don't worry, we'll get it out."
Hotels are freaking out right now.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Cliff, turn it back to you.
Okay, maybe we should do halftime, you think, Joe, or
Well, let's do this connections real quick.
okay, good enough.
Let's do
Well,
this.
Connections, it's an I guess it's an event that keeps on going and growing. And let's talk a little bit about your role with Connections, your roles, your responsibilities, your involvement, how you got involved, so on and so forth.
Well, appreciate that. Volunteerism is kind of my life, and Bill Yaden, I believe he's on. Bill, I'm working on it. Bill is my mentor on how to retire. He said, "Don't look back and memorize the word no when people try to suck you back into the vortex." But I love being a part of things. I really do. I want to be in the know and I want to contribute, but with the connections right through to the experience, with Larry Cooper, meetings and events, twice a year, East Coast, West Coast. I was involved for over 40 shows. And when BNP Media purchased the experience from meetings and events, Michael Balzano had asked me, he said, "Barry, since Larry's not doing this, you're probably not going to want." I said, "Like heck." I said, "Look, Larry's a really good friend. He's like a brother to me. And in fact, sometimes more than my brothers. But I'm also in love with my industry. And of course, I'll help." So for the two shows in Chattanooga, Tennessee, as well as Vegas, I contributed again my time to help in the transition because it should now blossom to a new show, a new type of show. Great ideas, Lisa Wagner and all that. They are really putting their time in, but I also needed to find my successor. And Lisa Lavender, RTI, what a dynamic, creative person. And I can now leave knowing that I didn't let anything down. I handed the baton to the next generation and keep it rocking and rolling. And wait till you see what's coming down the pike, guys, with these shows. There's a lot of synergy and energy going on, understanding that if you look back at our roots was cleaning, and then restoration kind of took over. Well, we're going back. We better start understanding that the one thing we do, whether it's cleaning, restoration, remediation, we want a clean environment when we're done. And they're not separate. They're all integrated. Inspection, cleaning, restoration, remediation are all integrated. And yet for a time, we splinter them out as separate entities. And it's time to bring things back, just like RIA, IICRC. Come back to the center, but come back with new thoughts, new visions, and be brave enough to accept change.
The text question that I think
Okay.
like your input on. The test question is, why is the industry struggling to attract new instructors? What do you think?
Wow. Well, Greg Anderson, I think, would speak very well to that. Greg Anderson, I wanted to be an instructor. And he, at that time, was managing the Earth City, Missouri, John Donne location. Greg is a great guy. His background's pretty immense. He was an insurance adjuster. He worked with one of the largest non-franchise groups, Joe, Cliff, you know them, Woodard's, out in Missouri. And he was also in charge of John Donne. So Greg had a beautiful vision of this industry from many, as Steve Covey says, many visions, okay? Look through the other lens. When he went in to become an instructor, they did not let him in right away. I hope I'm not bothering Greg saying that. There were so many obstacles in front, and some of them, and I tried to make some changes when I was there. I failed. You know, I'd love to say I'm perfect and everything I did worked. Yeah, right. I'm a human being. There are people out there that are ultra qualified to teach. Dr. Eugene Cole could run circles around people when it comes to microbiology, but he could not teach AMRT because he didn't have his carpet repair reinstallation certification.
Right. Yes.
Now that to me sounds a bit ridiculous. I think it might be some of the issues such as that, but yet I also support we just can't let anybody come in and be an instructor, even though you know how to do the work. Joe, as an educator, just because you can do something doesn't mean you have the ability to teach someone else how to do it. You're very good at it, but does it mean you can communicate that to another person? So I don't have the total answer, Cliff. I think it's a menagerie of everything, but we certainly need, and we do. We've got a good crop of young people coming in as instructors. I can feel good going into retirement that I'm not leaving things loose here. I've done my best, never perfect, but I think we got some good people coming in, but we sure could use a lot more.
Yeah.
I think one of the problems is that I think, if you make iced tea and you put a lot of ice in it after you made the tea, the ice has an effect on the tea, it dilutes it. And the more water you add, I think the more diluted it gets. And I actually think one of the challenges with IICRC is the fact that you can become an instructor and, in a subject that you know a lot about and you're qualified to teach and answer questions and so on and so forth. And once you get that one category, it's relatively easy, if not very easy, to add additional categories. And unfortunately, I think that's where it really gets really diluted. And unfortunately, I think there are a number of people out there that really do not have sufficient field experience, that are teaching some of the subjects. So I think actually the quality of some of the education, and also think that, it's kind of shifted away from facility-based education. With COVID, I think a lot of things went online, and I think it's a whole lot less expensive to have an employee, watch this, sitting in his office or in a plant. You can have multiple employees watch it rather than having to send those people cross country and put them up in hotels and motels and lose time for traveling and so on and so forth. So
let's
I
get into
agree
a
with
little
that.
more of that online. But first, I got to stop and pay some bills. We're going to stop for
Okay.
halftime. We'll be right back with the second half of our interview. We've got Barry Costa. Our association sponsors are the Environmental Information Association, EIA's multidisciplinary membership collects, generates, and disseminates information concerning environmental and occupational health hazards in the built environment at eia-usa.org. The IICRC, a nonprofit standards development and certifying body for the cleaning and restoration industry, IICRC.org. The Restoration Industry Association, the oldest and largest nonprofit professional trade association dedicated to providing leadership and promoting best practices through advocacy, standards, and professional qualifications for the restoration industry at restorationindustry.org. Industry sponsors are Particles Plus, feature-rich particle counters and air quality instrumentation. Count on us, particlesplus.com. BioPlanet at byoplanet.com, improving human, animal, and environmental health with electrostatic spray technology and advanced chemistries at byoplanet.com. Tramex meters, innovation in moisture detection and humidity monitoring systems since 1974 at tramexmeters.com. EMSL Analytical Inc., providing high-quality, full-service laboratory services since 1981. EMSL.com. All right, we're back with the second half of our interview. We've got Barry Costa. Barry, I want to just kind of wrap up the online training discussion a little bit. You've done quite a bit of it recently. How can we what suggestions would you give to instructors who are, I mean, it's not going away. What can instructors do to make it better for their students?
Well, I think we have to take a step back, Joe. Are all courses that the IICRC have conducive for online training? Okay. My opinion, no. Does that mean change needs to happen within the IICRC on how it evaluates participants in training? Yes. So let's take a look at training, period. You have face-to-face. You have face-to-face with hands-on. A lot of people think that if you're face-to-face, automatically you have hands-on. No, you don't. You have live stream, which is called synchronous. You have at your own pace, which is called asynchronous. Those are viable methods. Look, we were all forced to do it due to COVID. In fact, IICRC was forced into accepting it due to COVID. There were no schools going on. And yet Lee and Jim Pemberton, over 20 years ago, tried to get the organization to move towards live stream schools, but it wasn't the right time, I guess. So WRT, I believe with live stream is very, very viable because you're teaching cognitive information and you're being evaluated cognitively with a multiple choice exam. But that's an incomplete training, in my opinion. ASD, applied structural drawing, it's not advanced structural drawing, it's applied. That is supposed to be the hands-on of the cognitive course of WRT. So we had some very fruitful meetings where we said, okay, WRT, let's make that the cognitive portion of training, and we can even add the information that is put into the ASD into WRT. Here we go with those acronyms again, Joe. Now, ASD being applied structural drawing, I believe the way students should be evaluated is through performance, their ability to perform the craft. Let me give you a good analogy. You need to go in for surgery, and the doctor took nothing but cognitive training, whether they're synchronous, asynchronous, face-to-face, and yet the only evaluation of that doctor was multiple choice exams. They never had to do operations on a cadaver and prove that they could do that operation. Do you want them operating on you, Joe? I
No,
don't.
thanks.
So that is one big pill that Leslie Anderson and Paul Davis, she's the exam education chair, which I was that in the past, and I failed to get it done. That's one of my disappointments. I wish Leslie all the luck in the world. I think if the IICRC is going to be the premier, and that's the phrase they use, premier certification and standard writing body, then the way we evaluate participants need to be cognitive and performance. I'm working with a group right now, the Microbial Warrior, with Jeff Jones out of Oklahoma City. We have a three-way exam with that course. It's cognitive. You have to score an 80% or higher. It's skill-based performance with Dr. Jennifer DeBryan out of Tennessee University. She and I work together on that. And we have a third evaluation, behavioral. Because when you're in an environment like that, how you behave and handle yourself with people that are ultra traumatized, never mind your work with teammates, because you could die if you don't do things right and you're not watching over each other. We have a three-way evaluation with that one. So, that volunteer spirit, I'm being fed right now with a Microbial Warrior program that we're doing things that my wish was that the IICRC would also do. Look, they're a good organization, but they're like the Titanic. They're huge, and it takes a while for it to turn. Microbial Warrior, we're sprinting ahead. By the way, Cliff, it's not must with them. It's all science-based, proven with field experience with Microbial Warrior, and I'm loving that.
Cliff?
I haven't heard must in a long time, Barry.
Well, I haven't heard the word abstained in a long time.
No,
either.
I remember.
I
remember when everybody abstained. I remember that.
Oh gosh.
A long time ago. Yeah. Okay. What would you say that the high and low points would be looking back on your career?
Well, you know what? With my daughter Kim, she wrote these incredible 10 life lessons, and one of them was always look for the positive. And so I tend to try to live my life looking at what were the positive things that happened. I don't need to spout out negative things.
Okay.
What were the positives? So for me, I guess 2003, I was honored as Clean Facts Person of the Year. 2005, I received the Instructor of the Year award, but that's when it was voted on by your instructor peers. After a while, they changed it, called it Instructor of the Year, but it was based upon how many people you certified. But when it was originally the Instructor of the Year, I was honored that my peers thought I was doing a good job. And 2021, I received the People's Choice Award, which is voted on by students. I didn't even know people were voting for me. But I guess high points in the industry, exam standards chair. We brought Scantron in, a grading system, because they used to be all hand graded.
Right.
Standard chair 2003 to 2008 and 2005. We brought ANSI into the fold. I think that was a real positive high point. Education committee chair, exams committee, board of director till 2011. Education chair when we brought all the heads of state, because Lindsay Barlow was right. When every subgroup of the IICRC was doing their work and not communicating with each other, when something passed at a board meeting, Lindsay's going, oh, heck, do you realize what that means with this one, this one, this one? So we brought all the heads of state together and created the education committee. And when IICRC was almost at the bottom of the ocean because of a management group that was hired, we created a group called IICRA as a lifeboat for thousands of registrants that where are they going to go if this thing doesn't survive? And I have to give kudos to Jeff Bishop and Joe Dobbins for going to Vegas and resurrecting the ship. But there was a group of us that started an organization called ICRA. And we then actually, because we didn't have the rules we had to follow with IICRC, we developed performance exams for carpet cleaning and carpet repair, 180 elements that people were looking at objectively, not subjectively. Did you follow the row? Did you seal the edge? Did you this? Did you this? And we actually proved it could be done. I guess Microbial Warrior, as I said, I'm on the advisory board with Jeff and Laurie Jones, working with some of the most brilliant people, Dr. Kerry Lestage, Dr. Jennifer DeBryan, Dr. Mark Tucker with Sandia Labs, who also works for the government on weapons of mass destruction and so on. That's a high point for me right now because I'm fulfilling that need inside me of where are we going and how can I maybe contribute? And then lastly, Leukemia Lymphoma Society, the team and training program. I was one of the motivational speakers along with the Penguin who writes for Runner's World at 6 of the of $1 million to help find a cure for cancer. And I guess that's a really high point for me as well.
Yeah, let's do one more before we go to the roundup because we want to bring in the restoration industry's global watchdog here. I'm sure he's got a few comments, but I'm wondering, what advice do you have for IICRC's current and future instructors? How can they become the next Barry Costa?
Well, first of all, don't become the next Barry Costa. Be yourself. In fact, it was really interesting. Here I had a degree in education, and back when I started teaching, we didn't have to do 25, 50, 100% along with a fellow instructor. But Doug Bowles, I did one of my first courses at Mac Hubbard's in Wallingford, Connecticut. Doug was in the audience observing me teach. When we were done, he came up to me and said, Barry, that was one of the worst schools I've ever experienced in my life. And you talk about a person swallowing his pride.
Wow.
Okay. And it's okay. It really is. You need somebody to be straight with you and let you know. And so I guess the advice is what I learned. I was trying to be somebody else when I was teaching. I was trying to be a Doug Bowles. I was trying to be, like you said, the next Barry Costa. No, be true to yourself. Be who you are. Greg Anderson purchased Costa Group's intellectual property. And Greg, prior to doing that, as I said, wanted to be an instructor. Well, I would like to think that I did a little bit of mentoring with Greg. And when he did the 25, 50, and 100%, at the end of every one of those teaching assignments, we took about 3 hours to evaluate what he did. And I was constantly readjusting the program for his teaching style. The information could be the same, Joe, right? But the way somebody projects it, that is where the magic needs to come in. And how do you get that message from your brain to their brain? Is it visual? Is it auditory? Is it kinesthetic? Is it a combination? So I guess the best advice is learn your craft and don't ever think you know it all. I thought I knew a lot about cleaning. Yeah, until I met Jeff Jones and I learned about forensic cleaning and ATP testing. And I didn't understand what Dr. Berry 30 years ago said about cleaning. We all thought it was, well, let's use the word deep clean. No, he wasn't talking about that. He was talking about forensically cleaning an environment so that we can remove the things that, like Cliff, you and I said, it's what you don't see is what can hurt you. And John Lepotois on the call, he knows that very well. So I guess that's my advice is be yourself, know your craft, keep learning your craft, and get as much education on how to teach as you can.
Well said. Cliff, do you want to do one more or go to roundup?
No, let's go to roundup.
Let's go to the roundup then, Grayson. All right, we want to thank Tramex Meters at tramexmeters.com for sponsoring the roundup. And now we've got the restoration industry's global watchdog, Pete Consigli. Pete, I don't think I have to say any more. Just I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So, Cliff, I thought there was one question that you were going to ask before the roundup. So since you didn't ask it, I'm going to ask it of Barry. And Barry, now that you are retired, and I use that term loosely in air quotes, because I can hear the sucking sound as you're getting pulled back in like in Godfather 3. I tried to get out, but they wouldn't let me.
Listen, I'm sitting on the front of my seat. Was that the trivia question last week? My arms and my chair are wearing out.
I think everybody who has made an impact in any industry or in any form of life feel that they still have unfinished business. What's Barry Cost's unfinished business?
Yeah, I do. I do. And I guess, I said I like to say the high points, I guess the low points. There were two things that never got accomplished. One was performance assessment being a part of the assessment of students in a labor-based industry. My wife, Carol's a master cleaner. She's got all the courses required and her time requirement. She's never cleaned a carpet. You want to hire her? She's never had to prove that she could perform the craft. Now, Leslie Anderson, I have full faith. Wonderful person. She was just awarded Woman of the Year in Restoration at the current convention happening right now in Punta Gorda, Florida. I had people fighting me tooth and nail because I was asking for a change. And yet, if you look at the industry, senior carpet inspector, there's a hands-on element. Color repair, there's a hands-on element. Oriental rug, there's a hands-on element of identifying pieces. But again, it's missing. And I think the easiest place to start would be water damage. Let the WRT be the cognitive. Every methodology of presentation, live stream at your own pace will work. But ASD, make that the performance-based, and you test people on their skill acquisition. Pete, I won't forget, we were together. Jim Holland and I were sitting at a desk. You heard about the performance and walked up to us and congratulated us on that forward thinking. And that meant a lot to me, hearing it from you. And I think the second piece is right now my frustration that the standards are missing the boat on cleaning. We're still making decisions when something's clean on visual acuity. And it's a tough nut to crack. I think I have the solution. Right now, if you look at the standard of care definition, I want to make sure I get this correct. Practice that are common to region prudent members of the trade who are recognized in industry as qualified and competent. So the standard of care is a reflection of currently what the industry is doing right now. It doesn't include best practice. It doesn't include state of the art. It is a voluntary standard of what people are tending to do, just like Xactimate. Xactimate is not supposed to tell you what to charge unless you sign a contract that you agree to that. I think that's antitrust violation, but it's a reflection of the average price in the different regions of the country. So the way to get that in, because as John knows, congratulations again, John, for the evaluation for IEPs. There are 5 key words: shall, should, recommend, may, can. Shall and should are standard of care. If you want to bring in ATP testing, it cannot be a should, because it's not a reflection of currently what's going on. It's a best practice, a state of the art. But as a recommendation, I think it could go into the standard, because recommended is advised or suggested. Now, if it's in the book, some of the reasonably prudent members of the trade might start doing it. And if it becomes the standard of care, you can then elevate it from a recommend to a should. I believe that's the entry point that the committee could take. And that's my frustration. See, that's why I'm still with the Microbial Warrior program. We don't have those rules, and we are doing nothing but best practice and state of the art. I'm being fulfilled like you can't believe right now.
Yeah. Well, that's it.
Pete?
Well, no, what I was going to say, Barry, I said, that's it. Is that the unfinished business, or were you at a comma or a period is what I'm getting at?
No, that's going to be a period. Those are my 2 undone things in the industry, but I'm finding that I could do at least one of them with one of the programs I voluntarily, Bill, I'm still working with.
Okay.
Hey,
well,
Pete, if I might, Barry, ATP, as you know, was developed for food. Okay. And I'll never forget, Jim Holland came out and visited my facility in Pittsburgh, and we were talking about ATP. And what we did is he had his ATP meter with him. And what we did is we took a piece of wood and we tested it for microbial. Well, we tested it for, I guess, soiling, because that's kind of what it's going to measure. So in any event, we measured it, and I forget what it was, maybe 30 or 40 or whatever came up, which was relatively clean. What we then did is we took an iodine disinfectant, because that just happened to be what I had laying around. We diluted it according to label instructions. And I think that product was diluted, if I'm not mistaken, 2 ounces to 5 gallons. Okay. We then put it on the wood. We waited a couple of minutes, and then we hit it with ATP. It was off the chart. It totally maxed out.
Sure.
Okay. So the bottom line was, that was when I learned that there are certain things that work under certain circumstances and certain things that don't work under other circumstances. And there's a whole lot of people much smarter than both of us that are on both sides of this issue. And I think that actually, I'll just kind of leave it at that. I think the science just hasn't been sorted out yet.
Cliff, I don't disagree at all. In fact, ATP does not test for viruses like you and I know. Quartz can affect it. There's lots of things can affect. Right now, Dr. Richard Shaughnessy, Dr. Whitridge, Dr. Moon, one thing that I've talked to all of them. When you do ATP or DNA sampling or other methodologies, they all have their pros and cons. But one of the pros of ATP, it's very inexpensive. It's a quick turnaround, but it's not foolproof. Only a fool will think it is. But right now, let's simply take a look at what's our current method. It's visual acuity. We already know you can't see the things that can hurt you. So I think if we took a leap and started at least doing something like that, understanding that there are certain things you can't do, because if you do, your RLU reading with the ATP will be incorrect. It will not be valid. But it doesn't mean if it's not foolproof, we shouldn't at least take a step forward and let the science catch us. But let's not wait, because right now, H5N1, what else is going to come in that we're not prepared for, because we're still cleaning for only visual acuity? I'd say word of caution. That's all. And I don't disagree with you, Cliff.
Mr. Zlotnick, can I reclaim my time now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Then we went off in this ATP discussion. So Barry, I got a quick little quiz for you. Where'd you take your WRT class, and who was the instructor?
Sorry, once again?
Where did you take your WRT exam and class, and who was
When did I take my WRT? Oh my God. It was with a guy, his name was Pete Consigli. I think he just got back from Alaska teaching out there. He taught at Mac Hubbard's in Connecticut, and he was my instructor, and somehow I survived. Okay.
That memory's pretty good, buddy.
And that was,
listen,
if I recall, I think WRT might have been 1 day, or it could have just been when it just went to 2. But the thing that I remember most about that class, Barry, is that you had already put together your cases, and those cases were, I think, mostly for the reinstallation stuff. And you had them, and then you shortly realized afterwards you had to have 2 sets of each, because they were constantly in motion with FedEx or UPS, going from school to school to school. And I remember we talked about that. Now I got another question for you. Now, so far you're at 100, so try not to screw this up. Of all the WRT classes you ever did, could you remember the class where they served the best lunch, no holds barred?
Once again, the last thing you said, Pete, because I've had hearing loss, and I'm not hearing all the words you're saying. The very end.
At which WRT class did you teach that you can remember that this local sponsor served the absolute best lunch off the charts?
That was easy. It was in Toms River, New Jersey. Spencer Hess was the person And I bet I scored 100 on that one, Pete. You
Yeah.
were the chef.
Well, Spencer, he rented a local kitchen from a local firehouse, and we made food. It was unbelievable, and all the students went back. All they talked about was the lunch, and the owners were wondering what was going on. But I do remember in that particular class, I remember I was bouncing in and out of the kitchen watching you teach, and I saw a couple slides you had on there. One of them was of my flooded kitchen when I lived in Mount Vernon, which flooded. It was a Mannington Vega floor, and we had hired a professional photographer from Seattle to come up, and we put that adjusted presentation together. And I remember I told Claude, I said, Claude, I don't know how many people are going to actually buy this presentation, because it was kind of a giveaway if you bought equipment. Well, the first group of people that bought the presentation, who actually paid for it, we never thought anyone would pay for it, was Jeff Bishop, Tom Hill, all the instructors. And
Unbelievable.
Those photos that we did were due to photographers, were just classic photos that were, I actually felt honored that you still had them years later, that they still worked in your presentation, Barry. And I really mean that from my heart.
Well, Cliff, you had mentioned learn from the past. Pete, do you remember the one slide I had with Claude Blackburn extracting sewage wearing no PPE?
Oh, yes.
Okay, again, where we came, where we've been, and where we are now. But I think the big question for all of us, because we all have gray hair, where's the industry going next? And can it get there? Do we have people that have the level of energy that all of us here gave the industry out of passion? One thing, Pete, that you've always said is conflict of interest. Everybody has a conflict. As long as you announce it, you should be able to work with it, blah, 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 blah. Well, you know what? There are sometimes people are so involved, there is no conflict. They are so vested. And I hope the next generation vest the amount of passion and time and energy as you guys did, because we wouldn't be where we are today. And when that management group, do-overs, if IICRC could have a do-over, it would have been not hiring that management group that lost their history, because we've got very few people on the board of directors right now that knows the history, all the people that came before and what every one of them contributed, that they are standing on the shoulders of today. And I'm really sad about that. So I want to say thank you to you guys for everything you've done to make this industry that I've enjoyed. And let's pass the baton to the next generation with hope that they'll do it, and they will.
Barry, I will tell you this, though. The board may not have the history like you're saying, but I will tell you who does have the history: the shareholder group. And the shareholder group takes the nominations, and they actually seek the board. So the board actually reports to the shareholders, although the board manages the governing principles and sets policy for the institute. So you still have people in the shareholder group, like your buddy, I'm assuming, Barry Lichtenstein from NERC, and there's a whole long list of them for all the different groups who have been around and do have the history. And I do think that there's a very good connection now, working connection between the shareholders and the board. It always wasn't like that. So for whatever it's worth, Barry, some of that history is being preserved. Listen, I got just a couple things here that I wanted to kind of wrap up with. The experience actually ended yesterday, and I was there. You're right, Leslie. It was a wonderful time for her to receive that award. And I remember, you're talking about Ralph Bloss, and I remember one of my visits to Steamway. I used to go there every year to Denver to do the courses back in the day with Dries. And I was talking with Ralph at the end of the day one time, and Ralph said to me, he says, Pete, he goes, people have accused me of being a Bible thumping Ed York. And I said, well, Ralph, I don't know. There's probably a little bit of truth to that. You're a Christian man, but at the same time, you're also an innovator like Ed was. So I said, I guess you ought to just kind of take that in the good sense that it was given. It wasn't really meant in a mean way. It was kind of meant as a compliment. Ralph was really a pioneer. I remember at one of the ASCR conventions, I don't know if Cliff remembers that, Ralph was actually the keynote speaker, and his talk was about change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And
Right.
for about an hour, and the ASR audience isn't an easy audience to hold their attention for an hour, but Ralph did it, and he was like a Baptist preacher preaching from the pulpit, and he did a wonderful job with that. So Barry, in wrapping up, I have a couple of things. The first thing is you have all of these tools and all of these boxes, which you're not going to need anymore because they travel around, and you use them for the hands-on. Now you're, in whatever capacity, it's still kind of going to be virtual. So I was thinking, and actually Daryl Paulson, I was chatting with him yesterday from the experience with a couple of the board members. We had a call on a couple of things, and I said, hey, we're having an interview with Barry tomorrow. He said, great. He goes, ask Barry if he doesn't have anything to do with all of those tools, maybe he wants to donate them to the GRC, to the Institute. And as you're aware, and it's been out there, Daryl's been an advocate to buy another building in Vegas that was going to be the hands-on training facility for all the different things they do. So I said, well, if I'm going to ask Barry to do that on a radio show that will be a Cliff's blog, then here is what I would suggest before Barry makes a decision, is that we establish in that training room a Barry Costa room for the hands-on training, for Barry's tools. It will be part of your legacy. So Daryl said to me, yeah, go ahead and ask Barry that while you're on there. So I'm throwing it out there for you to think on. And what do you think?
Right now, there's a few people on the board that want to dedicate a room, but right now it's called restroom. But you know what? It's interesting because my carpet repair reinstallation tools, Pete. There was a show in Vegas that Larry Cooper. I had a booth. I literally brought all my new tools because I used to sell carpet repair tools during my school, and John Don was so gracious. They allowed me to do that. That's not a big moneymaker for them. So look, take that space in your showroom and put things that sell, and let me sell those during RRT. But then all the used tools that I used, as Joe said, place to place to place, I sold those also at the Connections event. And what didn't sell, I donated them to Shaw's installation lab because I wanted the tools to continue to give to the industry and all. Now, it's interesting because there is an instructor that is planning, I believe, on doing RRT at the GRC, the Global Resource Center, and they're talking to the IICRC because like I said, I'll make you a deal you don't want to refuse. Right now, I'm staring at all my tools that didn't sell when I taught my RRT. And they were talking about the IICRC purchasing them. And I said, Cliff, here we go. I'm going to put my board member hat on. I believe it would be inappropriate for the IICRC to sell the tools in a school because they neither own they don't own schools nor employ instructors, and I don't think they should be competing with the vendors out there. But you, the instructor, could buy those tools, and if IICRC allowed you to sell them during the event, I think that would be very appropriate. So I'm knocking a potential sale right out of my mouth, but again, back to the word integrity. What's appropriate, what's not. And I've donated my life since 1986 to the organization. I think I'm done. So
listen,
the tools I have
Barry,
here.
Hold on, Barry, that Daryl is always a negotiator. So it was only a suggestion. It was less than recommend, and it was just the opening salvo. But I think, in all sincerity, they'd love to have whatever that stuff in their training center eventually, if they ever are able to buy a second.
Yeah, Pete, I donated a ton of things to the IICRC. I have a lot of antiques in the carpet cleaning and installation world. I brought all of those over. I've also donated all of my books because Daryl at one point wanted to establish a library. So they have boxes and boxes and boxes of books and videos. And I even talked to Howie Wolf. I'd be happy to help set that library up at the GRC as well. So I've already donated an awful lot of my life. But those tools that I purchased, no, if I could find a buyer, I'm going to do that. Because my wife and I are we're in retirement right now. And I don't know what's going to happen to Social Security and all. So I
Yeah.
better start looking for Barry and Carol's interest here with the tools that I have. But just to let everybody know, no, I have donated not only my time, my love, my expertise, but I've also donated an awful lot of physical items to the organization. And I think that ends right now. But if somebody wants to buy these and sell them, I'll make you a deal you don't want to refuse.
Yeah,
There
well,
you
listen,
go.
and look, I know you've donated a lot of stuff, and a little of this is tongue in cheek, and I think the industry and all of us who really know you appreciate that. I was going to tell you to say hello to Carol, but since she's on the call, hi, Carol, how you doing? Listen, so in closing, I have one thing: your unfinished business. That comment that I had made when I saw you guys setting up that assessment, the model for that actually comes from Australia, and I had advocated, and I told the administration at the time who almost sunk the ship that you were referring to. After I saw what you guys were working on, I said, you ought to pay attention to this. It's important because I say in Australia, they have the government established what's called the RTO, like a registered training organization. And in order for someone to be recognized as a trade, there are three components to it. And the first part is like the classroom lecture type training. The second part is the actual physical hands-on, which is the assessment. But the final and third step is, and this is under their government rules, is that the owner of the company who wants to have, has to approve the assessment and fill out the government paperwork that that person who works for them has gone through the steps and is now a certified whatever, under the government rules. And so the Aussies have been talking about this for at least 10 to 15 years. And it's about time that it circles around. Joe Steebrook years ago, I asked him one time, is Canada, ahead of America in the building sciences? He says, not really. He goes, but he says, Winston Churchill summed up the Americans best. He says, you can count on them to do the right thing after they've exhausted all the other possibilities. So it's all the delay of sometimes overthinking and doing. It takes a while for it to kind of settle down. So, Barry, I actually think we're going to get to that. And of the assessment part of the unfinished business, hopefully in our lifetime, we'll see it. If there's another building, if there are areas, and there's a process and the next generation of trainers, because a focus for mine and Cliff's and a few other trainers, I've said for the last 10 years, our part of one of the things that we should do is to encourage and mentor those that want to be the next group of guys who are 20 years younger than us, where we were when we started to dovetail off of the Marty Kings and the Lloyd Weavers and the other people like that you mentioned. And I think that's actually happening, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah. Well, I wish Leslie all the luck in the world. I really do. And she's a wonderful person. It is my faith that one day, Pete, you're right, we will see that before we look at the roots of grass.
Yeah. So the next time that I take a road trip out west, actually next year the REA convention is in Savannah. The following year it's in Phoenix. And I'm a road trip guy. I've done enough flying in my life as you have, so I like to take road trips. So if I'm heading that way, I will not pass through Arizona, and I will hope that you're not out of the country somewhere, you and Carol enjoying whatever luxuries you'll have. I will definitely, we'll have breakfast. And what's your favorite place again?
Rutherford said, listen, do me a favor. Let me know when you're coming so I make sure I'm not around.
Yeah. Well, usually you can give a notice to the state police. Paul Pierce used to say every time I was coming to England, he would let MI6 know that, hey, Consigli's crossing the border. So you're putting an alert out for him. But anyway, Barry, I enjoyed the show, and thank you for everything you've done for the industry. Really, the write-up that Joe and Cliff gave for you is not an exaggeration. And anyway, thank you, my friend, and good luck in whatever your next venture is in the sunset years, as they call it, because we're all there.
Well, Pete, thanks so much for the feelings. I really appreciate it. Coming from you, it means a lot, buddy.
All right. Before we go, Barry, we always like to give our guest the last word. Anything you'd like to add? Anything we missed?
If you don't mind, first of all, Cliff, I want to say a thank you again. When my daughter passed of cancer, you dedicated a tree in her name. And if you thought I forgot, I didn't. And when Carol and I lost our daughter back in the year 2000, Pete Duncanson also lost his son, Stephen, to cancer. And it's something that we never want anyone to go through. But a lot of who I am today is an effect on my daughter. I learned more from her than any adult my whole life. And what I'd like to do is just cap off. My daughter wrote these incredible 10 life lessons, and I'm not going to read the whole piece, just the captions of the 10 life lessons that I want to leave with everybody, because I try to live my life this way. She did like a David Letterman 10 life lesson thing. Life lesson number 1, deal with life one day at a time. Number 9, turn every life experience into a learning experience. Number 8, always look for the positive. Number 7, try to do at least one new thing every day. Number 6, be true to yourself. Number 5, which is what I try to live my life by, touch as many lives as you can. And boy, did I have a chance to do that as an instructor.
Yep.
Number 4, enjoy the little things. Number 3, don't sweat the small stuff. And there's a lot of things that are small stuff. Number 2, hold on to your friends. So thanks, guys. And number 1, make every day count. And these were words from my daughter. And if I can leave everybody in or out, not in the industry with those 10 life lessons, then thank you, because my daughter touched your life as well as she touched mine.
Well said. Thank you very
Barry,
much.
can you hear me?
Yes. Hello.
This is Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Oh, no, I'm in trouble.
No, actually, you're not. I will just sum it up as it's been quite a ride
Yes,
being
it
married
has.
to you. And hi, Pete. By the way, his favorite restaurant is home.
Ah.
I figured that. And look, I'll accept the invitation home too, to home.
You, come on out.
Yep, come on down.
Well, this is Radio Joe saying thanks to this week's guests, Barry and Carol Costa. So thank you, Carol. I also want to thank the restoration industry's global watchdog, Pete Consigli, my co-host, the Z-Man, Cliff Zlotnick, Grayson Gone Fishing Fisher at the controls. Please come back and join us for the next episode of IAQ Radio Plus.
For IAQ Radio, I'm Spike Reel saying thanks for listening.
Hey guys, thank you so much for